Good morning and welcome to today's session. My name is Rebecca Cicco and I'll be presenting on the digital skills and capabilities and ensuring that your business is equipped in developing a skills-based strategy around enabling digital across your business. As the Chair of Women in BIM and more recently the Principal of Digital Enablement at Aurecon, I welcome you to this session and I hope you enjoy some of the insights that I'll be able to provide you around skills, capabilities and the future of our industry. For those of you who know me, obviously I've done a little bit of work around the world. I have travelled extensively and spent many years in the UK, essentially working in BIM and digital, supporting the industry and the uptake on a strategic level, on a project management level, and on an education training level in regard to BIM in accordance with industry standards. I'm also the chair and founder of Women in BIM, a global initiative which hits its 10-year milestone this year, which is essentially a group that is enabling industry to focus on diversity and inclusion and enabling women to either enter the industry, to retain their roles in industry, and also to support the future skills of our industry. We know that there are many issues in regard to developing skills and retaining talent as a result of the pandemic, but also as a result of the industry uptake of processes such as BIM and digital engineering. Much of the work I've done on a global level really was about ensuring that there was a leadership position in terms of skills and growing skills in the digital realm. And much of the work that I do not only lends itself toward obviously upskilling, but also towards setting up frameworks for clients to enable them to be more efficient. And when I say for clients, those that own or operate assets, those that have assets as part of their portfolio. And it is very important that obviously we address some of those areas of the industry to ensure that we have a good set of skills for the future. I thought it was important to mention a little bit about the history and my history personally, as I did spend around 10 years in the UK, having travelled to the UK in 2006, working and growing the reputation of the business that I founded in 2013, Digital Node. Digital Node was very much about BIM strategy, about project management, about skills training and education, both on a process level and a technical level. And we did much work on a global sense with clients in the government, the supply chain, and even with training providers, resellers, and education institutions, universities, schools, etc. Much of the work that I did was ensuring that there was obviously a good spill of practical insight to our clients. This is why, as a result, we were able to expand and we had projects essentially all over the world, in the UK to start with, and then obviously expanding into the US, Europe, Asia, and Australia, New Zealand. The journey from Digital Node to Aurecon essentially happened last year. So one of the, I guess, key criteria for the success of the business was the development of content, of training content, which I'll talk about shortly, but also some of the clients that we worked with in the digital space, not only in the UK, but also more locally, having spent a number of years back in Australia prior to the pandemic and then obviously through the pandemic. But through that, I guess the work that we undertook over in the UK, it was really aligning our clients with a consistent framework for the application of BIM and digital across their projects, and obviously underpinned by the International Suite of Standards 19650. I now act as the Principal of Digital Enablement for Aurecon, and much of our work is very much on that strategic level, informing, educating, advising our clients on their digital future, not only focusing on project delivery, but on the future requirements of their assets and essentially how they use data and digital process to inform, manage and operate their assets. So much of the work that we had undertook prior to the acquisition was really around the digital skills space. So many of the clients that we worked with was really about ensuring that we had the right knowledge and industry uptake for our clients to support the implementation of different digital processes. And again, I reiterate, not only on a technical level, but also on a project management level. Much of the research that I personally have undertaken suggests that technical skills are very much take a back step to the processes and procedures that enable digital across our businesses. The three key areas that essentially we are now building as part of the digital enablement advisory services within Aurecon very much focus on those things that I've just discussed in terms of strategic advisory, in project implementation and planning, and skills management and training services. And we're still working very closely with industry bodies and our clients in educating them not only in the BIM processes but also in digital engineering enablement, and also on some of the future initiatives that our clients are looking to, which relate to the ongoing longevity of how they manage and sustain their assets. That sustaining piece is very important for many of our clients in regard to the way that they manage their data across their built assets, both buildings and infrastructure. But I'm pleased, obviously, to announce that this is our 10th year that we enter in regard to Women in BIM. And I guess personally, when I started the initiative, which was in 2012, working in the UK, very, I guess, passionate about the industry and obviously the uptake of BIM in the UK based on the policy enabled within government. One of the things I noticed very quickly in that space and continue to see is the lack of the number of women or diverse roles in our sector. And therefore, from the beginning of the initiative, which essentially was just a networking/industry initiative, we've built our brand to very much focus on key projects that we initiate all over the world. And they include to encourage and support women entering the industry, to attract and promote the industry to women and to other, obviously, ethnic minorities and diversity groups. And then finally, to advance and retain women. And again, today, I will discuss the impact of skills and the future of our world in regard to those skills in terms of that diversity piece. And some of the data suggests that we're very much not quite there yet in regard to diversity and engaging in obviously a diverse world and a diverse industry. But this is all in terms of the projects that we do. This is all underpinned by those projects. And there are three key projects, a couple of them that are still very much in their infancy, but our most mature project is our Women in BIM Mentor Scheme, which enters its third year, tripled numbers this year. We've been able to match, obviously, a larger number of people across the world in regard to mentor and mentee matches. And based on the fact that we have over 60 women and men acting as what we call regional leads who endorse and support our core themes in over 35 countries of the world. We have a very strong push for women in BIM in our mentor scheme, and the support for that mentor scheme very much a global level, which is a humbling and also very exciting position for us to be in. And I personally thank our regional leads for their work and their support, as well as our core team. But a couple of the other projects that we're really thinking about really respond to the themes that I'll be talking about today, and they include the uptake of the different roles and responsibilities in BIM and digital, and how those roles and responsibilities are evolving, how there is a lack of consistency in the use of language, and also addressing the global gender pay gap, which is essentially still a very important issue to discuss in the current landscape, with many women either burning out or exiting the industry, which is a real problem based on some of these issues in regard to acknowledgement of their roles and the duties that they perform. And finally, having spent many years in the UK and obviously working and understanding the context of the UK BIM framework, being fluent in the industry standards, I've spoken to many of our regional leads all over the world in regard to the challenges that they face in terms of the adoption of industry standards. And ISO 19650 very much acts as a framework for us to be globally consistent. And there are still variations of how that is implemented all over the world. So our third project, which we've been discussing for a long time and we hope to, I guess, kickstart very soon, is a global maturity initiative and a research project around the application of 19650 in regard to the processes, the requirements, and even the policies and the jurisdictions that are occurring all over the world. Much of the work that I do and many of the initiatives that I run, not only around women in BIM, but obviously around wider global issues, very much support the United Nations sustainability goals. For those of you who don't know much about the United Nations sustainability goals, they're essentially 17 goals that are initiated as part of the United Nations work, and they are developed to support essentially a global partnership across all of the countries of the world in regard to offering insight and advice to target specific objectives. And you can see here that the objectives range from quite intensive global issues like poverty and obviously the issues with the environment, but also looking at further into these issues. We know that gender equality and sustainable cities and sustainable communities are very much two of the areas in regard to United Nations Goal 5, Sustainability Goal 5 and Sustainability Goal 11 to support the way that we initiate some of the work that we're doing. And essentially these goals and targets are aimed to achieve, essentially change all over the world and are targeted to address some of these issues in the next 15 years. When it comes to achieving gender equality, empowering young women, empowering women all over the world, we are still, again, having major issues around equal participation for women and some other, quite important issues as well in terms of violence against women and young women at the risk of child marriage, which is a very important issue and something that I want to draw attention to today because obviously it underpins some of the work that we do in regard to women in BIM. But one of the key, I guess, messages in regard to this slide is that women spend essentially half of their time or more of their time in unpaid domestic work. And what I've seen in regard to many of the reports, again, published by either initiatives around the United Nations or the World Economic Forum, is that there are many women leaving the industry and the uptake of new roles and new requirements for industries, not just in the built environment, very much not being achieved because of the lack of people entering those careers. So we need to be addressing this as a primary objective for our world in terms of obviously enabling the skills that we need for the future. But this presentation really is about ensuring that I guess I target those messages around skills and the enablement of digital competencies across our industry and an organisation. So essentially, this presentation will focus on the areas that we need to address in regard to upskilling and enabling our digital people or the digital skills and competencies across our organisation to support our people, but also reviewing frameworks, competency frameworks, which essentially are data-driven requirements to support how an organisation can upskill in a way that is more effective, in a way that is equal in regard to obviously men, women, and anybody really in the built environment, and that addresses some of those areas that we've discussed already. Much of the presentation today is also underpinned by three key pieces of research. Firstly, the Future of Jobs report in 2020, which is where you've probably seen release of a couple of articles I've written more recently around the way that our requirements for jobs and skills and the capabilities that underpin those jobs and skills are changing. And although released in 2020, much of the data in the Future of Jobs report published by the World Economic Forum are still quite relevant today. The second, obviously the second report here, the Global Gender Gap Report, only published in 2021, again last year, essentially the impact of the pandemic and the issues around equal pay, obviously for women, and obviously the skills that we would need to ensure that our obviously businesses are sustainable in the future. And finally, the jobs of tomorrow, which maps out opportunities in this new economy, the new economy that exists today around the fourth industrial revolution, around the uptake of the digital realm, really, in regard to populating skills requirements, enabling our people to have the right skills to be able to deliver on our projects, and reviewing some of the skills that will be needed in the future in regard to this new economy. But I guess in terms of the key requirements or the key themes in the Future of Jobs report, I think it's very important to touch on those to start with, because essentially there are, as you can see here, 10 key areas that have been addressed. Firstly, the rapid rate of technology. We all know that technology is continuing to move forward, but how is the rapid rate of the development of the technology being addressed in our organizations? The second point, disruption around automation. How do we ensure that there is no disruption to our people in regard to the way our projects and our processes can be automated? In regard to some of the other points made here, job creation. Obviously we've seen that there is a slow uptake of new jobs, and there is a slow, there is an acceleration of the current jobs that exist in terms of the destruction or removal of those jobs. And we're seeing quite a level of confusion in regard to that theme. Skills gaps, very important to address across all sectors, very much enabling us to take those firm actions. And essentially much of the future of work, in regard to the way we work, has already been addressed by many organisations or white collar workforce that has been enabling this new approach toward the way people work. And obviously as a result of the pandemic, another key theme is that online learning piece, training requirements in regard to how people train, the requirements for training, and then obviously the resources and the investment in training across our businesses. And we could go on, but essentially, in terms of the key themes of the report, it's very important to address that there is a very strong focus on the need for upskilling, the need for ensuring our people are continually learning in regard to the future of their roles, because the boundaries that we're seeing between obviously the digital realm and the built environment are becoming blurred. And this is essentially seen massive consequences for the industry in regard to the way we design, manage, and operate assets. Obviously, there will be new skills, and there currently are new workplace skills and capabilities required, many of them that don't even exist yet, which is, again, a really key important driver for our industry. But not only that, and much of the research and many of the presentations I deliver very much focus on the fact that the construction industry is amongst the least digitized. We're still falling behind, even though this data is obviously a little retired. We're still finding that the numbers of organisations that are pushing forward, are changing their requirements, are pushing to upskill their people is still low. And you can see here the construction industry is relatively low in terms of the digitisation, and that's why many organisations are now looking at what are the current digital skills that most businesses lack. How do we ensure that we're starting to change the way that we enable our industry and our companies to essentially support our clients and offer new services to our clients? So the ability to be able to change is a key driver for many industries, but there is a lack of digital skills broadly across our sector in obviously many of the areas noted here, which are again relatively closely related to the number of new roles that are starting to populate our industry. Some examples listed here are obviously roles in cybersecurity, in the integration of new technologies and the emergence of new technologies in data management, data analysis, software development, and even in generalized digital skills. So it is a very important area to address. But also, when we think about the future of work, so coupled with the lack of digital skills, the pandemic has already altered the way that we live and work. And many workers are not returning to their traditional office-based environments. We are seeing almost a division across our businesses, with those that are wanting to re-enter the workforce essentially face to face, and those that are comfortable in very much staying in the work from home scenario. So the Future of Work report and much of the initiatives around this research, also supported by the research undertaken by Gartner, a US organization that supports research in different industries around the adoption of new technologies and new solutions, is very much now saying, okay, what is the requirement for our businesses? What do we need to do to embed, I guess, cultural change to support the way that we are moving in regard to the technology shift, the way that we're moving in regard to the way our people require different levels of skill in regard to the generational shifts. And then, as I mentioned earlier, those social shifts, those individuals that prefer to be working from home, or those that essentially were wanting to get back to the office. But the World Economic Forum also estimates that the half-life of the average job skill is as little as 5 years. So this means that essentially every 5 years, a specific skill becomes about as half as valuable as it was. So in essence, human skill is a depreciating asset. So the impact of digital process and enabling our people to constantly upskill as a strategic incentive, and managing this upskilling, is crucial to the way our businesses evolve in the future, because the emerging trends which are going to and are starting to have a direct impact on the dynamics of the construction industry are the increase for obviously green construction, safer building environments, measurement of carbon, and obviously building performance. We know a lot about building information modeling, particularly in the UK, and then the systems for efficiency for building management, as well as potential digital twin outcomes. But Industry 4.0, I touched on earlier, really is around um, ensuring that there is an understanding of the key themes for our businesses. And those key themes essentially represent some of the drivers, or the linear pathways for how these skills are changing. The first being interconnectiveness, so the ability for devices, technologies, sensors, and people to communicate regularly, in the way that that is set up, the way that those frameworks are enabled across our businesses and across our cities, and obviously in our buildings or infrastructure assets. The second is information transparency. So the transparency afforded by Industry 4.0 essentially states that the technology providers will offer comprehensive information to be able to make decisions. So this interconnectivity will support data-driven decision making. And again, this is something that is already occurring across the world. We move into technical assistance, so the ability for different technology systems to be able to make decisions for us, to be able to problem solve, to be able to help humans with difficult or unsafe tasks. And again, many of the different digital initiatives across our building sites are there to help us to address some of those key issues, like building safety. And then also the ability to decentralize decisions, so the ability for our cyber physical systems to make decisions for us, and to be able to automate those decisions without having the element of human error involved. So Industry 4.0 really should be addressed as part of any of this skills landscape in these discussions, in regard to connectivity, in regard to the way that we use data to inform decisions, and obviously the way we set up our technologies and our infrastructure to be able to support that. We know that there is much work undertaken in regard to the way that industry will continue to change. And again, some of the key areas that we know have been addressed or will continue to be addressed in regard to these challenges are, firstly, the ability to be people-centric. Secondly, obviously, location independence, not worrying about where our people are, rather focusing on the way that they work rather than their physical location. And obviously, resilient delivery, ensuring that we have people that are working very, very hard to ensure that there is a possibility to be able to allow us to be resilient. It's also important to note that in the UK, obviously, recent studies have shown there are key barriers to growth in regard to the efficient operation of our industry. And this is essentially been researched to support the way that we move forward in regard to these challenges and skills. And this is why one of the key drivers is to enable us to understand the key impacts that occur across our industry. And we know that not only obviously the impact of BIM, but obviously the Building Safety Bill and other initiatives that are starting to allow us to look at new areas of insight and research into our businesses to enable the level of upskilling to be undertaken. And again, we know that there has been a recent release of fire safety standard in regard to digital. We know that that is a great step in regard to following on from the footsteps of obviously the Grenfell Tower tragedy. In 2011, the UK government obviously released the construction strategy, but we know that that was now that is a historical process, but the UK BIM framework and the move to digital twins, the information management processes, the differing technologies that are impacting how we procure, how we build, how we design, is an international problem. I know much of the work that we undertook in the UK very much was there was a challenge, in regard to being able to implement some of these things because there was a lack of skill. But this wasn't a UK issue. We are seeing the same dilemmas occurring all over the world. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a key driver for us in regard to women in BIM because, we know that as a global community, we can start to influence a standardized approach. But much of the work in regard to upskilling and learning in the way of industry standards is very much frowned upon in regions outside of the UK. And we are trying to make that change. So we also know that in regard to, the future jobs and the future requirements of our industry, there is also the uptake again on a global level of the smart cities and smart infrastructures and the way that industry standards are now enabling us to essentially formulate a strategic plan to enable our city leaders, our governments, etc., to consistently apply smart cities frameworks. And again, the BIM landscape and the digital twin landscape and all of the kind of obviously digital initiatives across the built environment very much come together to inform the smart cities initiative. And what we are seeing is there is a lack of these skills, particularly around the smart city frameworks and the industry standards that are supporting the smart city frameworks, which is a very important driver for our industry. Smart city standards have been in development as a result of, much like the BIM landscape, the beginning of draft documents as PAS documents, and then the internationalisation of industry standards to support smart city frameworks, not only in regard to sustainable development of communities, but also as a response to what I mentioned earlier with the United Nations Sustainability Goals. So these standards are now becoming more and more relevant, and there is a huge requirement for understanding and skills in this space. And I did mention the digital twin landscape, and it is a very interesting topic, not only in the UK, but across the world. We are seeing many uninformed clients asking for digital twin outcomes or asking for the digital twin. And we know that there is an uptake of digital twin initiatives all over the world. But what we are seeing is, again, a lack of maturity around what are those outcomes? What are those use cases? Because without understanding what the use cases might be, it is impossible to inform our clients in regard to the way that they should be embedding solutions to enable these outcomes. So even though the digital twin market is continuing to grow, we are seeing numerous requests for proposals across numerous governments, again, all over the world. And the investments are enormous. There's a huge risk at not having the requirements around digital twin, obviously digital twin knowledge, but also mapping out of the outcomes and how it relates to a very stringent, strong information management framework or a BIM requirement for the project. But, we all know that there's obviously been a lot of work undertaken in the UK around the National Digital Twin Program, and the National Digital Twin Program has been a strong driver for that, which has been a great initiative essentially for the industry, and a great initiative for the requirements of clients. How clients can start to inform their own policies and procedures around digital twin outcomes. But essentially, obviously with the release of those documents and the uptake of all of these things, there needs to be a strategic view on how we upskill. And this is why it brings me to the final part of the presentation, which is looking at obviously requirements around digital competencies and within Aurecon, but also much of the work that I've done in the past. The core driver is digitalization of an organization, and that means ensuring that we are addressing some of those impacts, focusing on learning, changing the way that we procure, ensuring that we have diverse teams and people, enabling our businesses to obviously respond to the lack of skills and the demand for different skills across our industry. But we do have frameworks internally around digital competencies and mapping out what those digital competencies are across an organization, and then measuring those digital competencies is a good way to ensure that a business can essentially then enable their businesses to grow. Because assessing organizational capability prior to implementing any organizational strategy around digital implementation is one of the key drivers that we've been informing our clients on for many years, in regard to the fact that many people will either assess themselves either too high or too low. And again, many of our clients we work with, essentially we're promoting that you must be appointing your strategic leads to ensure that there is a data centric approach toward managing your current organizational skills and then your project skills that require you to enable it, obviously for you to put a strategy in place. But what is the future of your business? And essentially one of the key drivers for developing that strategic blueprint is a review of, firstly, industry uptake of different technologies, enabling our people internally to be able to respond to our clients' needs, rather, but also what are the new skill requirements that we might need moving forward. And also what are our clients asking for? Is there a current project requirement for a different skill? Is there enough internally to be able to build those skills and then assess those skills internally? And that may only relate to one specific project to start with, but then obviously enabling your people to be able to transfer those roles and requirements around skills and knowledge, and enabling them to be obviously more efficient in regard to the way that they build those skills. So I guess to leave you with a message, one of the things that we often talk about, and again, it's a response to much of the research that is undertaken in the industry, is in order for you as a business to stay ahead of the curve, to stay ahead of obviously other businesses, we don't need our people to be faster, more efficient, to automate processes. We need our people to be developing skills that hone in on their human capabilities, collaboration, communication, integration. And one of the key areas that you would be interested to know regarding the research undertaken in the report that I mentioned earlier was that there is a lower number of people that have those skills, those leadership skills, those collaborative skills, and they're the skills that really we want people to be obviously addressing, and obviously enabling within their businesses, but also to stay up to date with what our clients are asking for, to bring in people to build capabilities with not those that are focused on the technological requirements, but rather those that have those inquisitive minds. And we are bringing in people from outside the industry, data analysis, people that are essentially sitting outside of the construction industry to support our projects and our initiatives, and ensuring that we are focusing on what we have at present, the BIM and digital engineering processes and skills, but also enabling them to be more efficient and focusing on what is lacking. So with that, I'll leave you, and I thank you for your attention. My details are listed on this slide, and I hope to hear from you again. And finally, I'd like to thank Ralph and the crew from the BIM Coordinators Summit for such a wonderful opportunity, and obviously a great reward to be able to speak, albeit virtually, at the conference today. So thank you.